Behind the Line, episode 26. I am your host, KC. Follow me on Twitter at KC_BTL84. Hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. Leave the 5-star rating on iTunes. You guys know the drill at this point. Divorce happens in America every day. Over 50% of marriages end in divorce. If you get married, you're more likely to end up divorced than with your happily ever after. People don't just wake up one morning and decide that I'm going to get divorced today. It happens gradually over a period of time. It's death by 1,000 cuts. Often it's a series of small things that add up. When you go through a divorce, or when you're getting ready to go through one, you have different phases. You have the angry phase, followed by the phase where you question if ending things is the right decision. And then you have the sadness phase. This is the point where you know it's over and you've done all you can to save the marriage, but you just got to get out. Right now, Jerry Jones is in the sadness phase of his divorce with Jason Garrett. He was tearing up during his post-game comments after that embarrassing loss to Buffalo yesterday. You can see that he really likes Jason Garrett, but the love affair is over. He said that he wasn't going to make a coaching change right now, and I believe that's the right decision. The Cowboys still have a chance to make the playoffs, though we all know they're not going to be playing in January, but they still have a chance. There's no shame in losing to the Buffalo Bills. I just want to say that out up front. They've got a top 5 defense. Josh Allen's really starting to come into his own. The Bills are a good football team. The problem isn't necessarily the loss. It's the way the Cowboys lost. It was a game filled with miscues and mistakes, errors. Dak Prescott went 2 straight possessions in the first half, turning the ball over. A fumble and an interception. It would have been 3. But he was saved by a penalty on one drive. They had missed field goals. The play calling yesterday in Dallas was uninspiring at best. I thought Zeke was playing well early in the game. And then they go and they just completely abandon the running game. Zeke was averaging nearly 6 yards a carry. They ran him 12 times. Dak continued his trend of not showing up against winning teams. Once again, Jason Garrett takes the ball out of the hands of his best player, which is Ezekiel Elliott, and he puts the game in the hands of Dak Prescott. The results were the same. This team is in full-blown panic mode. It's showing. The pressure is too much for these guys to handle. They're feeling pressure from ownership, pressure from the fan base, pressure from the media. Dak is playing for his contract. The same with Amari Cooper, who has all but disappeared in recent weeks. Cooper hasn't made it to the end zone since that game against Minnesota nearly 4 weeks ago. Jason Garrett's voice is lost in this locker room, which is the reason why Michael Bennett, a guy who just got to Dallas, had to step up and get in his team's ass after the game yesterday. After the loss, there was yelling and screaming heard outside the Cowboys locker room. It was not the voice of Jason Garrett. It was the voice of Michael Bennett. He's the only player on this team that knows what it takes to win. His head coach damn sure doesn't know what it takes. He proves that on a week-to-week basis. The gist of Michael Bennett's speech was, champions get remembered. People don't remember guys with big contracts. They don't remember individual stats. They remember champions. All season, all we've been hearing is Dallas has the number 1 offense in the NFL. And all season on this podcast, we've dispelled that myth. This offense is mundane. It's predictable. There are no in-game adjustments. Hell, there's not even week-to-week adjustments. It's the same thing every single week. So here we stand at the end of November, and the marriage between Jason Garrett and the Dallas Cowboys is on the road to divorce. And it's going to get worse. This is not getting better. I said it a couple of weeks ago that the Cowboys would start their collapse in New England, and we are 2 games into that collapse. They travel to Chicago next Thursday night. Play the Bears. One of the best defenses in the league. And they're going to lose that game. Week 16 in Philadelphia is going to decide the season for Dallas. The Eagles have the easiest remaining schedule in the league. They're going to tie the division Sunday after they beat Miami. The Cowboys have little chance to go on the road to Philadelphia and come out with a win. It's just not going to happen. Now, everyone's blaming Jason Garrett for the problems in Dallas, myself included, but he's not the only one at fault here. This team will never win with Dak Prescott at quarterback. Prescott's what I like to call fool's gold. He's good enough to get you to 8-8, 9-7. He's good enough to give you hope. He has flashes of brilliance where you think, oh man, Dak could be a great quarterback in this league. He's good enough to get you into the playoffs and bounced early. He's not the guy that can carry your team to the Super Bowl. He's just not. He folds under pressure. Dak is playing for a big money contract this season. He has all the incentive in the world right now to be great. He was gifted with a terrible division this year. The Cowboys should be running away with the NFC East. And they're going to end up 7-9 or 8-8 and out of the playoffs. We all know Jason Garrett's gone. Jerry Jones is going to keep him through the end of the year. But come Black Monday, he'll be one of the first coaches fired. But what does Jerry Jones do about Dak? You can't give him big money after this season's debacle. I don't care how great his stats are. The stats are misleading. You cannot give Dak Prescott big money at the end of this season. You can elect to franchise tag him, but then you're eating into your salary cap and overpaying for a mediocre quarterback. In my opinion, you've got to let him walk. The window in Dallas is closed. This team needs to go into a full rebuild. This roster has taken you as far as it can. I've been hearing whispers that Jerry Jones is considering tight end Jason Witten to be his next head coach. That would be a disaster of epic proportions. That would be worse than Jason Garrett. Witten has no coaching experience. Being an NFL head coach is the hardest job in sports. That's why the majority of your coaches start at the bottom. Then they become a wide receivers or a linebackers coach. Then an offensive or defensive coordinator. Then you make it to the head coaching level. And a lot of them fail once they get there. There are very few coaches in this league with long-term success. This team needs an experienced head coach. They don't need some guy trying to learn on the job. Someone to do what Bill Parcells did for them 15 years ago. Someone like a Jim Harbaugh, a proven winner at the NFL level. A guy who rebuilt the 49ers and took them to 3 straight NFC championship games and a Super Bowl. If Jerry Jones decides to give the job to Jason Witten, he's going to set his own franchise back 3 to 5 years. All right, moving on. Anthony Davis returned to New Orleans Wednesday night. First time back in New Orleans since the disaster that was last season. As expected, the home crowd booed him relentlessly. But you got to give credit where credit is due. AD balled out against the Pelicans. It was almost typical of his time in New Orleans. AD scores 41 points, Pelicans lose. He had the game-winning steal that sealed the game. The Lakers are the top seed in the Western Conference right now. But I still don't feel they're the best team. There's some glaring holes on the roster in Los Angeles. But I don't think the Lakers won that game as much as the Pelicans lost it. The officiating was terrible. That game went 3 hours long, review after review after review, And they still didn't get the calls right. And most of these calls they didn't get right went in New Orleans' favor. So it's not like I'm complaining that they screwed my team. They screwed the Lakers. How you can't get a call right after watching it for 5 minutes on replay is beyond me. I saw a lot of people on Twitter talking about how hard the Pelicans played, how they took the best team in the Western Conference to the wire without Lonzo Ball and Zion Williamson. Lonzo was missed. Outside of him, they really don't have a true point guard. But this wasn't a moral victory. This was a frustrating loss and a string of frustrating losses for the Pelicans this season. Too many turnovers. I believe they had around 20 turnovers in that game, which is a hallmark of Alvin Gentry's tenure in New Orleans. These teams turning the ball over. Mental errors. All season, the problem with this team has been slow starts. That wasn't the case Wednesday night. New Orleans led by double digits for 3 quarters. And then the predictable fourth quarter collapse came. They couldn't make shots late. Brandon Ingram was struggling the entire game. And they kept playing ISO ball through him in the fourth quarter. Drew Holiday had a weak inbound pass that Anthony Davis stole to end the game. Mental errors like this are a direct sign of bad coaching. Games like this are why I keep calling for Alvin Gentry to be relieved of his head coaching duties. As much as I love my team, I still like and respect Anthony Davis. I don't blame him at all for wanting out of New Orleans. The franchise was a disaster the 7 years he was here. Tom Benson and Mickey Loomis allowed mediocrity for too long. By the time that Gail Benson took over and made all the changes that were necessary, it was too late. Yes, the Pelicans have hope. They have good young players mixed with a lot of good veterans, but this team isn't contending for a championship anytime soon. This team will never contend for a championship under Alvin Gentry. Like mental errors, defense is a direct reflection of coaching. New Orleans is last in the NBA defensively. The Lakers were driving the lane with ease, alley-ooping, taking wide open threes with Pelicans just standing around and watching. Absolutely unacceptable. Drew Holiday is the best defender in the NBA as far as guards go. When he was guarding LeBron or AD, they were 0 for 7. But no one else on this fucking roster is giving anything on the defensive end. And it's Gentry's fault. He's never preached defense. It's why his teams in Phoenix never made it past the conference finals. Until David Griffin wakes up and loses this love affair that he's got with Alvin Gentry, this team in New Orleans will continue to underachieve. I'm not a fan of firing coaches midseason, but this team is 6-12. I don't care if Zion's out. There's enough talent on this roster to be better than 6-12 at this point. All right, I woke up yesterday morning, Thanksgiving morning, and I did my usual routine. Got my coffee, opened my DVR, found an episode of Law & Order SVU to turn on. Got my laptop out to check my podcast analytics across all the platforms, and then I started to look at Twitter and the news to figure out what I wanted to talk about today. I come across NFL.com's quarterback rankings through week 12. Now, I usually take rankings like this with a grain of salt. Rankings of any kind are purely subjective. They don't really mean anything. The only thing that matters in the NFL is the final score and your record. However, when I see something as egregious and as disrespectful as I saw yesterday morning, I've got to call it out. I could not believe these rankings. I had to check the date on my computer to make sure this wasn't April Fool's Day because these rankings had to be some kind of a joke. So the top 3 quarterbacks are Lamar Jackson, Russell Wilson, and Patrick Mahomes. I don't really have a problem with that. Deshaun Watson's at number 4. Then I get to number 5. And who do I see smiling at me? Dak Prescott. I almost spit my coffee all over my screen when I saw this garbage. You mean to tell me that Dak Prescott is a better quarterback through 12 weeks than Tom Brady and Drew Brees? I mean, I know Tom Brady's struggling and all, but I'm supposed to believe that Dak Prescott is better than Tom Brady? The GOAT? Really? This is outright blatant disrespect to two of the best quarterbacks to ever play this game. We could take a poll right now, putting Brees or Brady against Dak, and ask the public, who would you rather have under center on your team? 99.9% would pick Brees or Brady over Dak Prescott. The other 0.1% are Cowboys fuckboys or live most of their life in a straitjacket. Not only that, NFL.com has Derek Carr ranked higher than Tom Brady. Last I checked, Dak and Carr are sitting at 6-5 and Brady's 10-1. Someone please tell me how either of these two quarterbacks are better than Tom Brady. I would love to hear the explanation. Brady's having possibly the worst season of his career, and his team is still the best team in the AFC. I would take Tom Brady on one leg before I took 100% healthy Dak Prescott. Maybe that's a bit of a stretch, but you get my point. All right, let's get to the college football picks for today and tomorrow. It's rivalry week in college football. Should be a decent weekend, I suppose. Alabama at Auburn. Current line, Alabama minus 3.5. If Alabama has any chance, any prayer to make it into the college football playoffs, they have got to get a statement win on the road against Auburn. And I'm not talking about a 4 or 5 point, 6 point win. I'm talking they've got to win this game convincingly by double digits. Even with a backup quarterback, Alabama's the better football team. Auburn can't score. Their offense is anemic. Bo Nix has actually gotten worse as the season has progressed. The strength of this Auburn team is their defense. The Tigers haven't allowed over 24 points in a game all season. And unlike Bo Nix, they seem to be getting better defensively as the season moves on. Held Joe Burrow and a high-powered LSU offense to 23 points on the road. Kept their team within striking distance against Georgia a couple of weeks ago. This should be a low-scoring game, which, in most cases, I would lean toward the dog. Even though Auburn is tough at home, 6-1 against the spread their last 7 home games, I just can't put my money on Bo Nix. This could be Gus Malzahn's last game coaching at Jordan-Hare Stadium. And Alabama has dominated the Iron Bowl recently, winning 4 of their last 5 meetings. Most of those wins are by double digits. I think Alabama's the more motivated team here, with 3-loss Auburn with really nothing to play for. Going to back Nick Saban. I'm going to buy the hook for the insurance, taking Alabama minus 3. All right, the game for today, actually it's coming on in a couple of hours. Washington State at Washington, current line, Washington minus 7. Entering the season, a lot of people thought that the Apple Cup could have Pac-12 title implications. The only thing on the line between these two 6-5 teams is going to be bragging rights. It's been a disappointing season for both of these teams. Washington State seems to have never recovered from UCLA's 35-point comeback win back in September. And their in-state rival hasn't been much better. The Huskies have underachieved all season, lost 3 of their last 4 games. What's worse, Washington has been surprisingly bad at home this season. What used to be a tough place to play has kind of lost its luster. The Huskies have 3 losses already at home this year. Washington has dominated this series in recent years. They've won 9 of the last 10 by an average of 21 points. Their defense has been able to stuff the Cougars, but this year feels different to me. One thing Washington State has done effectively this season is score points. And the Huskies' defense has taken a step back from where they've been in recent years. 7 points just feels like too many for me to swallow. I'm going to take Washington State plus 7. My Saints won the NFC South last night. First team in the league to clinch a playoff spot. I'm still not impressed with this team at this point. Last couple of years, I've felt that the Saints were unbeatable. Took a fluke win for the Vikings to win that game back in 2018. Took the officials to screw New Orleans out of the NFC Championship game last season. But this season, the Saints just feel vulnerable to me. New Orleans is the best team in the NFL at killing their own momentum. The penalties were cleaned up a bit last night, but they were still there. Eli Apple had a couple of awful pass interference penalties. He played his worst game of the season last night. He basically gave the Falcons 6 free points in the first half. Sean Payton, I don't know why, but decided to start the game with Eli Apple covering Calvin Ridley instead of having Marshawn Lattimore. Questionable decision. He paid for it. Thankfully, unlike Jason Garrett, Payton makes in-game adjustments, and he moved Lattimore to cover Ridley. The Saints forced several Falcons turnovers in the second half and were unable to make Atlanta pay. They could not put this game away. Settled for field goals instead. The onside kick debacle at the end of the game was a microcosm of the Saints this season. This same thing happened a couple of months ago when they played the Bears. They were begging Atlanta to steal that game from them. And this wasn't a coaching problem either. This was not on the coaching staff. I thought it was initially. I went on Twitter last night and said that the Saints need to evaluate their special teams coach. It wasn't his fault. This was all on the players. Alvin Kamara basically ran away from the first onside kick, and then Michael Thomas came out for the next one and did the same damn thing. He wasn't about to take that big hit. Let's just give the Falcons the ball back and rely on our defense. In the end, I guess that was a good strategy. But make no mistake about it. The Saints are vulnerable. And I say that because this team continuously finds ways to beat themselves, even though they're winning. If they clean up the mistakes, there isn't a team in the NFL right now that can beat New Orleans. But that's not what we're seeing. Week after week after week, it's the same miscues from the same players. Penalties, drop passes. Jared Cook has become the best tight end in the league at dropping passes. You want to kill a drive? You want to kill your momentum? Throw the ball to Jared Cook. He wasn't the only one. Michael Thomas and Kamara were guilty as well. Throw in Ted Ginn for good measure. The only offensive guys that seemingly showed up for work last night were Drew Brees and Taysom Hill. And the offensive line. Taysom Hill is unbelievable. Blocked a punt, caught a touchdown, ran another touchdown for 30 yards. There's not a player in the league that's as versatile as Taysom Hill. And I don't know what the hell is going on right now with Alvin Kamara. He just hasn't been as effective as he was earlier in the season. The running game in New Orleans has all but disappeared. If this team expects to compete in the NFC, they've got to clean their shit up. The Saints have had one of the tougher schedules in the league. And like I said, if they play up to their potential, then no one's going to beat them. But I almost get a feeling from this team, because they've had so much success the past couple of years, that they're in this lackadaisical state of mind. They feel like they're good enough to overcome miscues. They're good enough to overcome these mistakes and still win. And so far, for the most part, it's worked out that way. But that's not the case long term. The margin of error is too thin in this league to make the mistakes the Saints are making at the rate that they're making them and win a Super Bowl. Because that's the goal. Winning the NFC South means nothing. It just guarantees a home playoff game that I get to go to. That's all that does. Making the NFC Championship game means nothing. They've already done that. It's Super Bowl or bust in New Orleans this year. If they don't win the Super Bowl, this season is a failure. All right, that's all for today, guys. I'll be back tomorrow with my 5 NFL plays for Sunday. Huge Sunday coming up in the NFL. You got the Ravens and the Niners, what many are calling a Super Bowl preview. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think San Francisco loses Sunday. I think they come to New Orleans the following Sunday and lose. Hit the like and subscribe button on YouTube. Leave the 5-star rating on iTunes. If there's anything out there that you guys want me to cover, leave me a comment or hit me up on Twitter at KC_BTL84. I'll see you tomorrow.